It's been a while since I've done a tabletop talk about a game I'm playing without really a lengthy review. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Iron Helm, which I've just concluded one game of it here that I actually did not die in. And in fact, I got 55 points at the end here, which lets me retire to a large, beautiful home with many servants and a sprawling, well-tended property with mature trees. In Iron Helm, you are playing a retired dungeoneer, and you are going out on one last adventure to see how you can fare. It is by the designer of the game Desolate, which was another game I played. Didn't like that game. I bought it, I played it, I sold it pretty quickly. I came back to Iron Helm because really was drawn in by the art, first of all. I love the style of this art, and I thought that that could possibly overcome the dislike I had for Desolate. And indeed, it has. I found Iron Helm, I've played it maybe six-ish times, to be enjoyable. It's a light dungeon crawl, and it has a similar mechanic to Desolate, where you are moving through the location by pulling in two cards from a very limited deck of cards and revealing one and choosing either to deal with that card. In this case, you probably would, because it's a pretty good thing to find a campsite, or if not, to then deal with the second card. And if you choose the second card the second time, you are forced to deal with the bottom portion of that card, which is going to be a more difficult thing to do. In essence, really what you're doing is you are moving through a dungeon and you are going to be fighting enemies. I mean, that's the bottom line. There's not much more than that in terms of development. You have items, you find loot, you get some potions, you will be triggering some plot points, which are little stories that you read and need to deal with. And each of the cards has a number of icons on them. And when you get a total of 10 of those icons, you trigger the boss that comes out at the end. There's gold, there's blessings, there are rations you have to consume. Pretty straightforward tropes, but it does work to give the feeling of risk management and push your luck, because you have to decide whether or not you think you're going to get a better card in this deck of cards. The deck of cards remains unchanged whether you play the base game or the expansions. I think there are 3 expansions. Let's see, I kind of went all in here and just bought everything that was available. I haven't yet dipped into the expansions, but beyond opening them up to add in some of the skill cards that I could do. Right, there's 3 expansions here, and but these cards remain unchanged. And in fact, the rule book says that as you familiarize yourself with these cards, you can improve your skill at the game, because you will have some sense perhaps of what could be coming, or you may remember that you have yet to encounter some of the good cards and you only have a few number of cards left, so it can pay off to be more risky. Thematically, to me, that is that kind of game, and a scoring game and a game where you're trying to improve your skills with a limited amount of mechanics and cards is somewhat antithetical to the concept of a dungeon crawl for me. But I understand that this is what the game is, and I knew that going in. The game doesn't falter in that, because you have to buy into that kind of concept for enjoyment of this game. I think what I wish there were a little more of were the enemies, because I have played in some of my games a situation where I actually defeated all the enemies and I hadn't yet finished the dungeon, so I needed to mark down some aspects of them for determining the boss monster later on, and then shuffle them back up and see them again. So I wish there was a little more quantity of enemies here. The quality of the art, again, it's, in my estimation, extremely high, very involving. I just love this style, and the impact of the enemies makes thematic sense. So for example, this skinkling gives you a poison. This wraith is going to steal a blessing if you have a blessing. The goblin could be bought off out of a fight if you pay him gold. Things of that nature. Again, very generic to some extent, generic to the theme, but appropriate to the theme. The unfortunate thing for me was the rule book. I mean, I'm not the first to say this. There's an appendix to the rule books, which is really clearly information that should have been in the rule book to start with. It's not in any way optional to read, as an appendix you might think would be. So if you're going to buy this game and play it, consider this part of the rule book. And even so, there's an extensive FAQ that I printed out here, which is just so many pages of information that both should have been in the rulebook to start with, and also, frankly, you can't even make sense of what the explanations are until, well, at least I couldn't make sense of what the explanations were until I had already played like a game or two somewhat erroneously, because it doesn't make sense to ask or answer these questions until you've already played and then not understood what's going on. So it's, I think it's just a byproduct of the era that we're in today, where things are released maybe without proper playtesting, or I don't really know the reason for that. But on the upside of things, it is the era that we're in today allows for independent designers to produce, or I should say, independent designers to create and have produced for them. This is available. I bought this through Game Crafter. Games that are just never going to be having a mainstream appeal. It's a niche hobby that we're in, and the kind of person that is going to play this is this is a solo only game within a niche within a niche hobby. And we are living in an era where it is possible to obtain a game like this, and albeit somewhat costly, but you're paying for art. As far as I'm concerned, you're paying for creative independence, you're paying for creative vision that somebody has, and clearly Jason Glover has a vision and creates a world and a feeling. The other thing I'll say about it in closing is that the games that I played the ones that came down to the wire, and here we look at one of the 3 bosses that are available in the base game. This was the one that I finally successfully defeated. You feel the desperation. You feel as if you've journeyed through this dungeon to get to this place with whatever resources you have left. Now, this particular character, my character ended up with 4 health at the end, but that was partially because I had some luck in blessings that I had obtained that right before I faced this beast gave me a couple of more health to start out and face him with, and luck in having certain cards like Holy Water. The die rolling in the game does imbue a certain amount of luck, but that is also, in my opinion, very thematic to a dungeon. It's just like, free for all. You might get lucky, you might find some gold, you might get lucky and you might find a clearing, you might get unlucky and wield a huge axe and only do 2 damage. That's the name of the game in a dungeon crawl, I think, and that comes through quite clearly in Iron Helm. And the expansions, as I said, add in some new plots that are local to the expansions, but you can also take some of the skills and the characters from these adventure packs, which is what I've done, to mix them in and give yourself more options with just the base game. That's a look at Iron Helm. I've enjoyed it. I've played it kind of obsessively a bunch of times in a row. Time to go back in the box. It definitely will come out again. It's a good travel game if you like dungeon crawls, if you don't mind some pulling of your hair out when the dice go against you. It's worth looking into.